Today we're going to talk about effective project management and how to keep your projects on track even if they unforeseenly get off track. First thing is we're going to talk about planning and the strategy behind planning and effective planning. It's definitely a skill that you have to learn, and as you learn it, and if you add additional crews and things like that and even services, you then have to understand like the time frame, but not even just time frame, the realistic time frame for that person to be able to do whatever is asked of them or whatever's on that contract or where that scope of work is. Because if you don't, it may look, one of the sayings I always use with engineers that put out plans is it looks great on paper, but realistically, is it going to work in the field? Usually it does, but there's always those quirks and things that pop up that it's not going to work. So you got to come up with a solution to that base or to that issue that comes up. And that same goes with planning. So the best thing to do is have a strategy to navigate around any issues that come up within your project that may cause delays. Next thing we're going to talk about is rolling right into contingency plans if and when projects get delayed. Now, going back to the first thing we talked about, effective scheduling, is you want to make sure you have those buffer days. You want to understand your crew's skill set and then have a day or two buffer depending on the length of the project and the size of the project. Just because it's easier to move people up than push people back. Because this probably isn't their only job that's on the schedule. They have a multiple set of jobs following that one. So you need to make sure that you have those buffer days and you can move people up or fill them in with smaller jobs if that crew finishes early, versus having a very tight schedule and then all of a sudden something happens. Like let's say with our industry, we're installing piers and our average depth is 28 feet and all of a sudden they're going 75 feet. So that extra time that it takes to install to 75 feet is dramatic. It can add 2 to 3 days to a project easily. And if you don't have those buffer days, then you're going to be up against the wall trying to push people back, and it's a trickle-down effect. So if you push one project back, and if they don't get it done on time, then you're pushing the next project back, next project back, next project back. And every time that you push a project back is a day that's lost that you're not producing the amount of revenue that you need to produce. So every day that a project gets pushed back that there's not additional compensation for is going to cost your company money. So you need to have an effective schedule that keeps the amount of revenue coming in per day at a certain amount to keep your company alive. The next thing that we need to do is talk about allocating resources for certain scopes and projects. So you're not going to have every piece of equipment available all the time for every project. You're going to have a crew that does one service, another one that does another service, and another one that does another service, just because you don't have enough equipment. Unless you're loaded and you're just throwing money around and you just have all this extra equipment sitting there as assets, then great, you won't have this problem. But for most companies, they're trying to be as efficient with assets as they can. So we only have a limited amount of assets. So let's say our skid steer is being used. We then know that we can't have another project that we're going to need a skid steer on until this project gets done to allocate that over there. If we do, then we're going to have a rental cost. And obviously that costs your company money that you weren't probably expecting, and it's going to cut into actually your profit for that company. It's a hard expense. So you want to make sure that you allocate the crews based on the equipment that you have available to produce or to perform the work that's being asked. All right, guys, gonna wrap this one up. Pretty straightforward. Make sure that you have somebody that understands planning and scheduling for projects. Don't think that every project's gonna be hunky-dory, smooth sailing, because they 99% probably are, but that 1% of the time you gotta be ready for it. And if you're not ready for it, you're going to be just losing your mind and pulling your hair out of why this is getting delayed. And then you're going to have to be scrambling of how to actually get caught back up to that schedule that you have for the remaining customers on your schedule. The other thing too is know what kind of equipment you have and the availability of that equipment, because if you don't, that again is going to probably tick off some customers because you're promising one thing, you don't have the equipment to do it, and then the last thing you'll be able to do is rent the equipment. That's going to cost you money and eat into your profits for that particular project. All right, guys, make sure that you implement these strategies. Make sure you understand how to do all this stuff, and make sure you never settle for bad planning and poor scheduling.